In April of 1841, Silas Rutland made an announcement that shocked even the cruelest plantation owners in South Carolina. He was placing his daughter, Catherine, a 28-year-old woman weighing over 260 pounds, under the complete authority of an enslaved man named Ezekiel Cross, not as a nurse, not as a companion, as her owner in every way that mattered, except on paper. The white society of Colleton County was scandalized, but they had no idea what Rutland was truly doing or what Ezekiel Cross would do to Catherine over the following months. By November, Catherine's body had changed in ways no one could explain. 13 men were dead, and Cypress Grove Plantation was nothing but ash. What really happened between that enslaved man and the plantation owner's daughter? What did he do to her that terrified everyone who witnessed it? Before we uncover the disturbing truth, subscribe, hit that bell, and comment your state below. Back to where it all began. Spring in Colleton County arrived with oppressive heat and humidity that made the air feel solid. The Combe River moved slowly through the low country, its dark water reflecting Spanish moss that hung from live oak trees like funeral shrouds. Rice paddies stretched for miles, their flooded fields worked by hundreds of enslaved people who moved through water, up to their knees from dawn until dusk. This was wealth built on suffering, prosperity extracted from human misery, all of it justified by men who convinced themselves that cruelty was simply the natural order of things. Cypress Grove Plantation sat on 800 acres of moderately productive land. Its owner, Silas Rutland, was not quite part of the county's elite, but desperately wanted to be. He owned 58 enslaved people, which made him wealthy by most standards, but barely qualified him as mid-tier in local society. The truly powerful families owned thousands of acres and hundreds of slaves. They summered in Charleston and sent their children to universities in the North. Their names carried weight that could open doors or destroy reputations with a single word. Silas had married Elizabeth Yancey in 1812, a union that brought moderate land holdings and a respected surname. Elizabeth had been a practical woman who kept meticulous records and seemed more interested in profit margins than social climbing. She died giving birth in 1813 to a daughter christened Catherine. 28 years, Silas raised Catherine alone while focusing his energies on gaining entry to the inner circles of county power. Way of people who forget to eat when consumed by obsession. His hair had gone gray prematurely, giving him a severe appearance that matched his cold temperament. In business, he was known for being shrewd but honorable enough, the kind of man who would drive hard bargains but keep his word. Daughter Catherine had grown up isolated, educated by tutors, never quite belonging anywhere. By 1841, she was 28 years old and weighed nearly 260 pounds. Her body was swollen from years of medications prescribed by doctors who diagnosed her with hysteria and female nervous disorders. She suffered violent fits where she would scream and throw objects. She had attacked her father with a letter opener the previous year, leaving a scar across his left hand. Society of Colleton County whispered about her with false sympathy. Poor Silas Rutland, burdened with a mad daughter. What a shame. She had been such a pretty child. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew what Catherine had witnessed when she was 12 years old, or that her madness was not madness at all, but a rational response to living with monsters. The letter arrived on April 7th, delivered by private courier. Silas opened it in his study, expecting business correspondence. Instead, he found 3 pages on expensive paper, sealed with red wax bearing a symbol he recognized immediately, a scythe crossed with wheat stalks, the mark of the Brethren of the Harvest. The Brethren, 13 men who gathered in darkness to perform rituals they believed strengthened the land through blood sacrifice. They mixed old European traditions with beliefs borrowed from enslaved people who understood spirits and power, believed the strong were meant to consume the weak, literally when necessary. Silas had been initiated in 1822. He had attended perhaps 40 gatherings over 19 years, participating in rituals that ranged from disturbing to monstrous. The letter informed him he was in debt. $12,000 borrowed over years, of gambling losses and failed investments. An impossible sum. Repayment would require selling most of his land and all his slaves, destroying everything he had built. But the letter offered an alternative, a demonstration of commitment from members in difficult positions. Silas would take his daughter Catherine and place her under the complete authority of one of his enslaved men, not temporarily, not as punishment, as a genuine transfer of responsibility, lasting 1 full year. The enslaved man would have total control over her person, her daily activities, her treatment. Silas would announce this publicly at a gathering of the county's prominent families, explaining it as an extreme medical measure for his daughter's condition. The humiliation would be absolute. In a society where white women were supposedly precious and protected above all others, Silas would be declaring his daughter worth less than his property. But if he agreed, his debt would be forgiven, and the brethren would provide financial support to restore his position. Silas sat in his study for hours that night. He thought about his options. Bankruptcy would destroy him completely. The brethren had connections to every judge, every lawyer, every politician in the region. They could make him disappear if he became a problem, or he could sacrifice his daughter's dignity to maintain his own position. The choice society had trained him to make: property over people, power over morality. He wrote his acceptance by candlelight and sent it before dawn. 3 days later, another letter arrived, with a name and brief history. Ezekiel Cross, age 33, purchased recently through an intermediary from a Virginia plantation. Skills included carpentry and herbal medicine. Temperament listed as quiet and obedient. What the letter did not say was that Ezekiel Cross had been selected specifically for this purpose, that his placement at Cypress Grove was no accident, that he carried his own burning need for justice and the patience to wait for exactly the right moment. Ezekiel arrived on April 13th in a wagon driven by a slave trader named Henderson. The wagon pulled directly to the main house, unusual since most slave transactions happened near the barns. Silas came out onto the porch, shading his eyes against the morning sun. Wagon bed sat Ezekiel. The first thing Silas noticed was his eyes. Enslaved people kept their gaze down as a survival mechanism, but Ezekiel looked directly at Silas, his expression calm and assessing. It made Silas deeply uncomfortable. Ezekiel was tall, perhaps 6'2", with broad shoulders and lean muscle from a lifetime of hard labor. His skin was unmarked by whipping scars. His clothes were simple but clean. Hands were large and calloused, but his fingers had a precision that suggested skilled work rather than just brute force. Henderson climbed down and handed papers to Silas. Ezekiel Cross, as requested. Previous owner said he was quiet but capable. Your associates want you to know this one was carefully selected. Silas barely glanced at the papers. He addressed Ezekiel directly. You understand why you are here? Yes, sir. Ezekiel's voice was deep and measured with a slight Virginia accent. My daughter is unwell. You will be responsible for her care. Doctors have failed. You claim knowledge of herbal treatments. My grandmother was a healer, sir. She taught me before I was sold. The transaction completed quickly. Ezekiel was shown to a small cabin near the main house, separate from other slave quarters. He was given basic supplies and told his duties would begin the next day. He was informed that his sole responsibility was Catherine's care, and that failure would have severe consequences. Ezekiel nodded and said, Yes, sir, when required. Then he was left alone. For the first time since arriving, he allowed his expression to change. His jaw unclenched slightly, his shoulders relaxed. He sat on the bed and pulled from inside his shirt a small cloth bundle. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a piece of worn paper with 3 names written in a child's uncertain handwriting. Ruth, his wife, his son, his daughter, sold away from him 3 years ago to a plantation in Alabama known for working slaves to death. He had learned they all died within 18 months. Sarah from untreated fever, Benjamin from an injury that turned septic, Ruth from simply giving up, a 6-year-old child who stopped eating because she could not understand why her family had been torn apart, and Silas Rutland had been the one to sell them. Not because he needed money, not because they had done anything wrong, but because he had been demonstrating to the brethren that he could make hard decisions without sentimentality. He had split a family, like kindling for burning. Ezekiel had spent 2 years working his way south, deliberately getting sold from plantation to plantation, always gathering information. The brethren, through whispers, he learned about their rituals and members. He learned they considered themselves above any consequence. When the opportunity came to be sold to Rutland specifically, Ezekiel knew this was his chance. He would have access to Rutled's house, to his secrets, to his vulnerabilities, and sometimes justice came not from courts or laws but from patience and planning, and being willing to become exactly as monstrous as necessary. He folded the paper with the 3 names and tucked it away. Then he lay back and stared at the ceiling and began planning what came next. His first day began on April 14th. A house slave, named Judith, middle-aged with graying hair, brought him to Catherine's room on the 2nd floor. Reluctantly, "Miss Catherine, your father has brought someone to help with your treatments." Crash from inside, something heavy hitting the wall. Then Catherine's voice, slurred but venomous. "I do not want more treatments. Send him away." Judith looked at Ezekiel with sympathy. "She has bad days. This is one." Ezekiel opened the door and stepped inside, closing it before Judith could follow. The room was large but dark, heavy curtains drawn. The air was stale, smelling of unwashed bedding and something else. The sweet rot smell of mercury, books scattered across the floor. A shattered picture against the wall, clothes everywhere. Catherine sat in a chair by the cold fireplace, wrapped in a stained dressing gown. Face was puffy, eyes unfocused. Her hands trembled continuously on the chair. Arms. She looked at Ezekiel with confusion, then fear, then anger. "Are you?" I said, "No more doctors. I am not a doctor, miss. My name is Ezekiel. Your father asked me to help you." "Help?" She laughed harshly. "That is what they all say. Help, treatment, medicine. They mean poison. They mean chains. They mean silence." Suddenly swaying. "I know what this is. Remembering, for speaking, for refusing to forget." Ezekiel stood still, non-threatening. "What are you supposed to forget?" The question caught her off guard. Her anger flickered to something more vulnerable. "You do not know." "I know nothing, miss. Only that your father says you are unwell." Catherine studied him intently, as if really seeing him for the first time. "You are not from here. Virginia originally, miss. Do you know what happens in this house? What they do in the cellar?" Ezekiel's pulse quickened, but he kept his expression neutral. "Not know what you mean. Liar. No heat in it. Just exhaustion. Everyone lies. Is easier than truth." She sat heavily. "Leave me alone. Tell my father his newest torment failed." But Ezekiel moved to the window and drew open the curtains. Sunlight flooded in. Catherine cried out, covering her eyes. When did you last go outside, miss? I cannot walk that far. I'm too weak. When did you last eat without gluten? A minute. The medicine is necessary. Doctors say so. What if the doctors are wrong? Her hands came down from her eyes. She stared at him with hope and terror mixed. What did you say? Ezekiel turned from the window. This was the moment the first card played. Wrong. What if everything you have been told about your condition is designed not to help you, but to keep you controllable? What if your father has been poisoning you for years to ensure you never become well enough to speak about what you saw? Absolute silence. Catherine's eyes went wide. Her trembling hands stilled. For 30 seconds, she just sat there, her mind working. When she spoke, her voice was different, clearer. He told you. Your father told me nothing, miss, but I have eyes. I know mercury poisoning. I know long-term Lord use. Healthy women do not become like this without someone working hard to make them that way. Why would you say this? Suspicion crept back. This is a trick. You are testing me. I am telling you, I can help you become truly, well, clear-minded, strong enough to walk out of this room, but it will not be easy. Your body has been dependent on those medicines for years. Stopping will be painful. You will feel worse before better, and your father will not approve. Then why would you do it? Ezekiel met her eyes. Because I have my own reasons for wanting Silas Rutland to suffer, and the best way to make him suffer is to give him back a daughter who is sane enough to remember everything and strong enough to speak about it. The truth dangerous to speak so plainly, but Catherine was damaged, not stupid. She would see through manipulation, but genuine common cause, that she might believe. You want revenge on my father? Yes, miss. What did he do? To you? He sold my family, my wife, and 2 children, sent them to their deaths, for no reason except to prove something to people who judge worth by cruelty. Catherine absorbed this, then nodded. Slowly, the brethren. He sold them for the brethren. Brethren, miss, you do not know. She laughed, something manic in it. You will learn. Everyone learns eventually. She leaned forward. If I agree, if I let you help me, what happens then? You get well, miss, and when you are well, we decide what to do next. I have my revenge to plan. You have yours. Perhaps they align. Catherine studied him intently. Finally, she spoke. I want them all dead. My father, Judge Pelham, Reverend Crenshaw, all of them, every man who stood in that cellar. Them to suffer first, to know it is coming to beg. Then I want them dead. The venom was shocking, not for its intensity, but because it came from someone dismissed as mad and harmless. This was not madness. This was rage concentrated by years of suppression. Ezekiel nodded. Then we have an understanding, Miss Catherine. Conspirators, use my name. I cannot, miss. Not where anyone might hear. Must be careful. Then know something. Ezekiel. Catherine's eyes glittered. Dangerously. I have killed before. 3 people. House slaves who might have told my father about my lucid moments. I cannot remember exactly how. The leadenum blurs everything. But I know I did it. They disappeared. Their families were told they ran away. She smiled terribly. So if you plan to betray me, to use me, then dispose of me, know that I am not a victim. I am something worse. Ice ran down Ezekiel's spine. He had expected an ally, not someone whose capacity for violence might exceed his own. But he kept steady. Will not betray you. Good. Catherine stood more steadily. Then, let us begin. But I have one condition. When this is over, when we have had our revenge, want to die, I do not want to live with what I have seen and done. You will help him so with that too. Agreed. Ezekiel had not expected that, but he was committed. Now, agreed. Then we have a deal. Catherine extended her hand. Hesitation. Ezekiel shook it. Her grip was stronger than expected. Following week, Ezekiel began Catherine's treatment. He gradually reduced her laudanum, replacing some with herbal tinctures, valerian root for anxiety and sleep, digestive distress, milk thistle to help her liver process accumulated toxins. The process was brutal. Catherine spent 3 days in bed with fever, shaking and vomiting. Stayed with her through it, holding a basin while she was sick, wiping her face with cool cloths, speaking quietly, just to remind her she was not alone. When the worst passed, she was weak but clearer than she had been in years. The constant tremor decreased. Her speech was less slurred. She could focus on reading. Then real work began. Ezekiel had her walking short distances at first, from her room to the hallway end and back. It exhausted her, but he insisted. Every day a little further. He adjusted her diet, bringing lean meats and vegetables instead of heavy pastries. He limited portions strictly, though she fought him years of using food as comfort, making restriction difficult. While working on her physical recovery, they talked. Catherine told him about the cellar, about what she saw at 12. She described it in detail that made Ezekiel's stomach turn, but he listened without interruption. She told him about years of gaslighting that followed, father convincing everyone, including herself, that she was mad, that she invented memories, that nothing she said could be trusted. She told him about the journal she kept hidden, pages documenting dates and times when her father left late at night, names of visitors at strange hours, sounds from below that should not be possible. Ezekiel told her about his family, about Sarah who sang while working and taught their children to read despite the danger, about Benjamin, who at 8 could do mathematics that amazed overseers, about Ruth who loved flowers and picked wild blooms to make their cabin beautiful. He told her how Silas came to the Virginia plantation with a buyer's warrant. He inspected them like livestock, how he agreed to purchase all 3 for reasonable price, then changed terms at the last moment, saying he only needed the woman and children, not Ezekiel. He deliberately split the family for no practical reason, but simply because he could. He smiled when he did it. Ezekiel said quietly, "That is what I remember most. My son crying, holding my leg, begging, my wife trying to be strong, telling Benjamin to be brave, and your father smiled like it pleased him to cause that pain." Newly clear eyes. "I am sorry. I know sorry is just a word, but I am sorry you suffered because of what my father is. You are not responsible for what he does, miss. No, but I am responsible for what I do next, and I promise you, Ezekiel, he will pay for what he took from you. They will all pay." The formal announcement was scheduled for April 29th. 41 people gathered in the Cypress Grove dining room for what invitations described as an important family announcement. The county's elite arrived in carriages. Judge Pelham with his wife Eleanor, Reverend Crenshaw with his daughter Marcus Fanning and his family, Benjamin Lyle from the bank. The meal was elaborate: oysters, roasted duck, multiple rice dishes, sweet potatoes, fresh bread, a towering cake for dessert. Through it all, Catherine sat at her father's right hand, eating sparingly, speaking when spoken to, but volunteering nothing. Ezekiel served alongside other house slaves, moving quietly, refilling glasses, clearing plates. He was invisible to most guests, but he listened to every word, watched every interaction, filed away information. After dessert, Silas stood and tapped his glass. "My friends, thank you for joining us. Catherine has been unwell for years. We tried every treatment, doctors from Charleston, a specialist from Philadelphia. Nothing helped until recently. He gestured toward Ezekiel. 2 weeks ago I brought in Ezekiel, who has knowledge of herbal medicine. As you can see, Catherine is much improved. Cleared, calm, more herself than in many years. Polite murmurs around the table. Catherine kept her expression neutral, though Ezekiel saw her hands gripping her napkin beneath the table. Improvement, Sattler's continued, has led to a difficult decision. Catherine requires this ongoing care more intensive than our household can provide. After much consideration, I've decided Ezekiel will assume full responsibility for my daughter's welfare. He will have complete authority over her treatment, daily activities, and living arrangements, effective immediately. The murmurs changed tone. Confusion now. Several guests exchanged glances. Mrs. Pelham's face registered shock. Marcus, Fanning spoke up. Silas, I do not understand. You are placing your daughter under a slave's care, permanently. I am placing her with someone who succeeded where others failed. My daughter's health is more important than social convention. But surely Reverend Crenshaw interjected, carefully. There are options, a companion, a nurse, someone more appropriate. Silas's expression hardened. I have made my decision. Catherine agrees. Do you not, daughter? All eyes turned to Catherine. This was the moment she could refuse, could expose everything, could bring it all crashing down. Instead, she smiled, small, controlled, revealing nothing. I trust my father's judgment. Ezekiel has been kind, and his treatments help. I am content with this arrangement, perfectly delivered. But Ezekiel saw what others did not. Saw her knuckles white on that napkin, saw the flash in her eyes, promising violence. She was playing the required role, the obedient daughter. But inside she was screaming. The evening passed in awkward conversation. Some guests left early, others stayed to speak with Silas privately, asking questions they did not want public. Ezekiel caught fragments. Are you certain this is wise? What will people say? The brethren will not approve of this becoming public. That last from Judge Pelham, spoken low near the study. Silas's response was too quiet to hear, but whatever he said made Pelham nod and clap his shoulder. By midnight, all guests had departed. Catherine retired to her room. Silas went to his study. Ezekiel helped with cleanup, then made his way upstairs. He knocked softly on Catherine's door. And she sat by the window, still in her dinner dress, looking out at dark grounds. She did not turn. It is done. Then, I am officially your responsibility. Property of property. How absurd. How are you feeling, miss? I want to burn this house down with everyone in it. But we must be patient. Is that not what you tell me? Yes, miss. I agreed because I want them to feel secure. I want them to think this is just my father's eccentricity. I want them to forget about me while we work. She turned to look at him. Their faces, the disgust, the pity. They think I am pathetic. They have no idea what we are planning. And what exactly are we planning, miss? Catherine moved to her dresser and pulled out a wooden box. Inside were papers covered in her handwriting. I have been documenting everything I remember for years. Dates, names, ritual descriptions coded, so it looks like nonsense if found. But I can decode it. We have enough to destroy 20 men. And will anyone believe us, miss? A woman recently recovered from madness. And an enslaved man. No, which is why we need proof. They cannot dismiss real, physical evidence. She pulled out one specific page. I know where they keep their records. The Brethren maintains a ledger of all activities, every ritual, every sacrifice, every member's participation. It ensures everyone is equally guilty. My father mentioned it years ago before he realized I would remember. Where is this ledger? Cellar. There is a hidden room beyond the main chamber. I never saw inside, but I heard them talk about it, where they keep everything they cannot afford to lose. Ezekiel felt excitement, mixed with dread. Such a ledger would be devastating evidence, but getting it meant going into the heart of the Brethren's domain. We would need to access it when the house is quiet. Father travels to Charleston monthly for business. The next trip is May 14th. We'll be gone 3 days. That gives us 2 weeks to prepare. We need the cellar. Layout, every room, every hiding place. I can help. I've been thinking about this for 16 years. I know exactly what needs to happen. They spent an hour going over details, speaking in whispers. Catherine sketched the cellar layout from memory. Ezekiel asked about guards, keys, slave schedules when he left her room. It was nearly 2 o'clock in the morning. He made his way to his small room, mind racing. He was fully committed now to conspiracy with a woman who was brilliant and damaged and frightening. He pulled out the paper with his family's names and looked at it by candlelight. I am doing this for you, for Sarah, for Benjamin, for Ruth. Every person who suffered, because men like Silas Rotold believe power gives them the right to destroy lives. He blew out the candle and lay in darkness, listening to the house settle. Below, in a cellar he had never seen, were secrets that could tear apart South Carolina's most powerful families. 2 weeks he would go down there to find them. The 2 weeks passed with deceptive calm. Catherine continued improving. Her weight dropped. Her mind stayed sharp. She walked further each day. More importantly, she was translating sections of her coded journals for Ezekiel, filling in details about the Brethren that made his blood run cold. The Brethren was not unique to Culleton County. It was part of a larger network across the South. Connected societies in Charleston, Savannah, New Orleans, Richmond, different names, but always the same structure. Wealthy men who believed their power derived from ancient practices of dominance and sacrifice. They believed they continued traditions going back thousands of years. Catherine explained one afternoon. European mystery cults mixed with things learned from enslaved people. They twisted it into something monstrous. Justification for things that have no justification. And the sacrifice is not always human. Animals, but other times they take people who will not be missed. With no family, poor whites who wander onto their properties. Father mentioned a child, but I do not know if that was literal. Where do bodies go? Swamps on every plantation. Bodies go in and are never found. Alligators do the rest. And this ledger documents all of it. Every ritual for 40 years. Names, dates, descriptions. They keep it because they need mutual complicity. Everyone equally guilty, so no one can expose the others without destroying themselves. May 14th arrived. Silas left for Charleston early morning. Taking his carriage and manservant, he would stay with associates, attend to business, expected back evening of May 16th. That gave them almost 3 full days. They waited until nightfall before moving. The house settled into evening routine. By 10, the main house was silent. They met in Catherine's room. She had changed into simple dark clothes, allowing freedom of movement. Hair pulled back tightly. She looked like someone preparing for battle. "Are you certain, miss?" "I have never been more certain." "Let us go." The cellar entrance was in the kitchen behind the pantry. The door looked like wall paneling, but pressed right. It clicked open, revealing narrow stairs descending into darkness. The smell hit immediately. Damp earth and old smoke. And something organic and rotten. Catherine noticed his reaction. "Used to it. I wish I could say you stopped smelling it, but I would be lying." They descended carefully, Ezekiel carrying a shuttered lantern providing minimal light. The stairs were steep and worn, wood creaking. After 20 steps they reached bottom. The cellar was larger than expected, easily 30 feet square with low ceilings supported by thick beams. Floor was packed earth, walls lined with stones weeping moisture. At center was what Catherine called the altar, though now it looked like just a heavy wooden table, but dark stains on its surface and grooves carved in edges told their own story. Around the room were candle holders, clay jars sealed with wax, wooden boxes, a rack holding black robes with crimson trim, shelves containing books and papers. Catherine moved with certainty of someone following a memorized map, led Ezekiel to the far wall where stones seemed solid, but she pressed one particular stone, and something clicked. A section swung inward, revealing another chamber. This room was smaller, 10 feet square, and here the brethren kept its secrets. The ledger sat on a wooden stand in the center, massive 2 feet tall and 18 in wide, bound in dark leather, with metal clasps. Next to it were smaller journals. Around the walls were shelves containing jars Ezekiel refused to examine too closely. There, Catherine whispered, pointing, "That is what we need." Ezekiel moved to the stand and opened the book carefully. Pages were thick parchment covered in meticulous handwriting, names and dates going back to 1800, ritual descriptions written in clinical detail, like scientific experiments rather than atrocities. He began reading, and with each entry, his horror deepened. These men had not just committed occasional violence, they made it systematic. Regular gatherings every 6 weeks, rituals timed to agricultural cycles, believing blood-fed land. They had killed at least 37 people over the years, probably more. Mostly enslaved people, but also poor whites, indigenous people, anyone vulnerable. And notes about consumption. Killed, they had eaten. Pieces of victims prepared specific ways consumed. During ritualistic meals they believed transferred power. Whispered, "This is worse than I imagined. I tried to tell you." Catherine's voice was flat. "I watched them. When I was 12, I watched them cut pieces from that woman on the altar. Watched my father raise a goblet and drink. Then I spent 16 years being told I was insane. That I imagined it all. But I knew. I always knew." Ezekiel turned pages looking for entries about his family. October 1838. 3 lines. Purchased family unit from Virginia. Woman Sarah. Children Benjamin and Ruth. Separated from male to demonstrate resolve. Sent to Alabama. Contact. Payment received. 3 lines. That was all his family's destruction merited. "We need to take this," Ezekiel said, voice tight with rage. "No." Catherine's hand on his arm. "If we take it now, they will know immediately. We need to copy the most important entries first." She was right. But Ezekiel wanted to burn everything. But revenge required patience, required being smarter than the enemy. They spent 3 hours working. Catherine had brought paper and ink. She copied entries about specific rituals, focusing on ones, naming current members. Ezekiel documented victims, creating a list of names and dates that could potentially be cross-referenced with other records. Exhausting work made worse by the content. Several times Ezekiel had to stop, hands shaking too badly. Catherine left the chamber entirely, overcome by memories, but slowly, methodically, they built their case page after page of evidence. So focused, neither heard footsteps on the cellar stairs. First indication something was wrong was when light flared in the outer chamber, lantern light much brighter than their single lamp. Ezekiel looked up sharply. Going cold. Silas Rotald stood in the doorway flanked by 2 other men. But them, At least 4 more figures in the main cellar. I must admit, Silas said calmly, I am impressed. I did not think you would find the inner chamber. Catherine stood slowly, placing herself between her father and Ezekiel. You were supposed to be in Charleston. I was supposed to be, but I never trusted your miraculous recovery, so I made arrangements. I left this morning, yes, but I returned this afternoon and watched the house all evening, waiting to see what you would do. Into the chamber. The 2 men blocking the exit. Did you really think I would not anticipate this? That I would not prepare for the possibility you might remember, might seek revenge, and been poisoning me for 16 years? Catherine's voice steady despite everything. And you expect me to simply accept that? I expect you to understand it was necessary. Should not have a child. You could not understand. I could not allow you to destroy everything. I was 12, and I watched you murder a woman and eat her flesh. That was not fear, Father. That was a reasonable response to witnessing evil. Evil, such a simple word. Silas moved further into the room, eyes moving between Catherine and Ezekiel, using my daughter to get to me, filling her head with ideas of revenge. Ezekiel said nothing, calculating distances and odds. 7 men against 1, with Catherine in no condition to fight. The situation looked hopeless. Silas seemed to read his thoughts. Not do anything foolish. I do not want to hurt either of you, not permanently, but I cannot have this rebellion continuing. He gestured to the men behind him. Bring them upstairs. We need to discuss what happens next. They were taken to Silas's study and locked inside together. The room was windowless, except for one high transom, impossible to reach. The door was heavy oak, locked from outside. As soon as they were alone, Catherine moved to Ezekiel. Are you hurt? No, miss, but we are in serious trouble. Yes, but not as much as you think. She pulled something from inside her dress. The papers they had been copying. I managed to keep these. He did not search me. Too confident. That will not help if we are dead. Or not going to die. Not tonight. Catherine's eyes were calculating. My father will want to resolve this without killing me if possible. I am still his daughter, his blood. That gives us leverage. Over the next hour they heard arrivals, voices in the hall, men gathering. The brethren was assembling. Finally the door opened. Marcus Fanning stood there, face grim. They are ready for you. Come peacefully, and you will not be harmed. They were led down to the cellar again. This time the main chamber had been transformed. All 13 brethren members present, dressed in ritual robes, candles burned in every holder. Altar was draped with crimson cloth, 13 chairs arranged in a perfect circle, all occupied, except Silas's at the altar's head. Ezekiel and Catherine were positioned in the circle's center, forced to stand facing Silas. The other members watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility. Silas removed his hood. Brothers of the harvest, thank you for coming on short notice. We face a crisis. My daughter and her associate discovered our inner chamber. They saw the ledger. They were copying entries when I interrupted them. Judge Pelham spoke up. Then they must be silenced permanently. Complicated. I disagree. Silas held up a hand. My daughter is blood. I cannot simply dispose of her without exhausting other options. And the man represents an opportunity. What opportunity, Reverend? Crenshaw asked. To test something I have long believed. That a person can be drawn into our work through their own actions if framed correctly. Silas turned to Ezekiel. You want revenge on me? You want to destroy me for what I did to your family. I understand that. But what if I offered you a different kind of revenge, a more meaningful one? I do not understand, Ezekiel said. Carefully, I am offering you membership, not as an equal. The Brethren does not accept men of color as full members, but as an associate, you would attend our gatherings, participate in rituals, and in exchange, I would give you what you want most. Is dead. You cannot give me what I want. No, but I can give you revenge against the people who killed them. The plantation owner in Alabama who worked your wife and children to death. Name is Edward Gaines. He is not part of the Brethren. He has no protection from us. If you join us, prove your loyalty. I will give you resources to destroy him. Money, information, whatever you need to make him suffer as you have suffered. The offer hung in the air, obscene in its calculation. Join the men who destroyed his family to get revenge on another monster. And if I refuse, then you and Catherine both die tonight. Your bodies go into the swamp. Will ever know what happened. The papers Catherine was copying will be burned, her journals destroyed. Continues as it always has. Silas spread his hands. But if you accept, you live. Catherine lives. You get your revenge. All it costs is your soul. Ezekiel looked at Catherine. Her face was pale, but she gave him the slightest shake of her head. Do not do it. Whatever happens, do not become them. Accepting, about getting inside their organization, about gathering more evidence, about buying time. Back at Silas and Catherine, what happens to her? She returns to her room, resumes her medications, forgets what she has seen. The alternative is she dies alongside you. No, Catherine's voice cut across the chamber. I will not forget again. I will not be silenced. Kill me if you must, Father, but I will not pretend I do not know what you are. Silas's expression hardened. Then you have made your choice. Wait. Ezekiel spoke quickly. I accept, but on one condition. Catherine goes free, not back to her room. Free. Let her leave this house. Leave South Carolina. Give her money to start over. If you do that, I will join you. Several Brethren members shook their heads. Boy makes a point. The girl is already broken. Even if she spoke, who would believe her? But a man willing to join us to be complicit, that is valuable. That proves our power extends even to those who hate us. Finally, he nodded. Very well. Catherine will be sent north. I have associates in Philadelphia who will take her in. She will be given a new identity and stipend to live on, but she can never return to South Carolina. Never contact anyone from her old life. She will be dead to everyone here. Agreed. Catherine stared at Ezekiel. No, I will not leave you to agreed. Ezekiel interrupted. She goes free. I join you. Then we have a bargain. Silas turned to the others. Catherine leaves tomorrow. Ezekiel's initiation will be in 3 weeks at the next regular gathering. Until then he remains at Cypress Grove under watch. If he tries to escape or contact anyone, the deal is void and both die. Understood? Ezekiel nodded. Catherine looked like she wanted to argue, but Ezekiel caught her eye and shook his head slightly. Trust me. Catherine left the next morning. A closed carriage took her away at dawn. Ezekiel watched from his cabin window as it rolled down the long drive and disappeared into the trees. She had not been allowed to say goodbye. He had not been allowed to speak with her after the confrontation in the cellar. Escorted to her room the previous night, she had looked back at him once. Her eyes, he had seen something that gave him hope. She understood. She knew he had not truly surrendered. She knew this was strategy, not defeat. The question was whether she would actually go to Philadelphia or whether she had her own plans. The 3 weeks that followed were the longest of Ezekiel's life. He was kept under constant watch. 2 overseers followed, became everywhere. He was not allowed to leave the plantation grounds. He was given menial work to keep him occupied, meaningless tasks that accomplished nothing but filled time. But he was also given access to the main house, to the study where Silas kept his papers, to the cellar where the next gathering would take place. They were watching him, yes. But they were also testing him, seeing if he would try to escape, seeing if he would attempt sabotage. Ezekiel did neither. He played the role of defeated man who had made a pragmatic choice for survival. He was quiet, obedient, asked no questions, caused no problems. But he was observing everything, learning the routines of the house, noting which slaves could be trusted, which overseers were cruel, which brethren members visited regularly. He was building a mental map of how everything worked, looking for weaknesses. And at night, alone in his cabin, he thought about what was coming. Initiation would require participation in their rituals. They would test him. They would want to make him complicit in something horrible, so he could never expose them without destroying himself. He thought about how far he was willing to go, what lines he would not cross, even for revenge, whether there was any act so terrible that justice did not justify it. He did not have good answers to those questions. Night before his initiation, Silas came to his cabin. It was late after midnight. Ezekiel woke to knocking and opened the door to find his owner standing there alone. Ezekiel stepped aside. Silas entered and looked around the sparse room. He spoke. "Tomorrow you will become one of us. Not fully, never fully. But enough. I want you to understand what that means. I understand what I agreed to. Do you? Do you truly?" Silas sat on the single chair, uninvited. The Brethren has existed for 43 years. In that time, we have never lost a member to exposure. Never had someone break our code of silence. Do you know why? Because everyone is equally guilty. Partly, but also because we take care of each other. A man joins the Brethren, and suddenly doors open. Business opportunities appear. Legal problems disappear. Enemies find themselves in difficulty. We are not just a society, Ezekiel, or a network of power that extends across the entire South. Once you are part of that network, even as an associate, you will have access to resources you cannot imagine. Exchange. I help you murder people. Silas did not flinch. In exchange, you help us maintain the natural order, the strong over the weak, the powerful over the powerless. That is how the world has always worked. We simply acknowledge it and use it to our advantage. You killed my family to demonstrate your commitment to that order. I did, and I would do it again because sentiment is weakness. Love is weakness. The moment you allow yourself to care more about individuals than about power, you have already lost. Silas leaned forward. But here is what I want you to understand. Your family is dead. Nothing you do will change that. But you can ensure their deaths meant something. You can use the power the Brethren offers to prevent other families from suffering the same fate. You can work from inside our organization to make changes, to push for less brutal treatment of slaves, to advocate for better conditions. Have a voice at our table that is worth something. It was almost convincing. Almost. The idea that Ezekiel could become some kind of reformer from within, using his position to help others. But he knew it was a trap, a rationalization. The moment he participated in their rituals, he would be compromised. The moment he accepted their power, he would be corrupted by it. "Why are you telling me this?" Ezekiel asked. "You to succeed. Because having you as an ally is more valuable than having you as an enemy. Because I killed your family, but I do not want to kill you." Silas stood. "Tomorrow night, you will be asked to do something difficult, something that will test whether you truly commit to this path. I am telling you now, whatever you are asked to do, do it." Do not hesitate. Do not show weakness. Because if you fail the test, both you and Catherine die. Yes, I know she is not really in Philadelphia. I know she is hiding somewhere planning her own revenge, but I have people watching for her. The moment she surfaces, if you have not proven yourself, she will be found and killed. Do you understand? Ice flooded through Ezekiel. Catherine was alive, but she was in danger, and his actions tomorrow would determine whether she lived or died. I understand, he said quietly. Silas nodded and left without another word. Ezekiel sat alone in the dark cabin, thinking about the impossible position he was in. To participate in something monstrous tomorrow, had to prove himself to monsters, had to become complicit in evil, or he had to find another way. A third option that neither Silas nor the brethren anticipated. He pulled out the paper with his family's names, looked at them in the moonlight coming through the window. "Forgive me," he whispered, "for what I'm about to do, for what I have to become. I promise you it will not be for nothing." The gathering began at midnight on June 3rd. Ezekiel was brought to the cellar by two brethren members who stripped him to the waist and tied his hands behind his back, led him down the stairs into the candle-lit chamber where all 13 members waited, in their robes. Silas stood at the altar's head. "Brothers of the harvest, tonight we conduct an initiation unlike any in our history. We bring into our circle a man who has every reason to hate us. A man who has lost everything because of what we represent. We do this to prove that our power extends even to our enemies, that anyone can be brought into the fold if the price is right." Gestured, and two more brethren members brought forward a figure bound and gagged, struggling weakly. The person on the altar and stepped back. It was a young woman enslaved, maybe 18 or 19 years old, terrified. "This is your test, Ezekiel," Silas said, "to join us. You must participate in our ritual. You must take the knife and make the first cut. You must prove that your desire for revenge against Gaines is stronger than your moral objections to our methods. If you refuse, you die here tonight. If you accept, you become one of us, and we help you destroy the man who killed your family." The other brethren members began chanting low, rhythmic sounds in a language Ezekiel did not recognize. The candles flickered. Shadows danced on the walls. Silas held out a knife, long blade, wickedly sharp handle wrapped in leather. "Take it. Make the choice." Ezekiel looked at the woman on the altar. She was crying, trying to scream through the gag. Her eyes found his. In them, he saw every enslaved person who had ever suffered at the hands of people like the brethren. Benjamin Ruth. He saw himself. He looked at the knife, at Silas, at the 13 tall men watching to see what he would do. This was the moment, the point where he would either become a monster or die resisting. One he had been planning for 3 weeks, one that required perfect timing and absolute commitment. He took the knife. The brethren members nodded approvingly. Silas smiled. The chanting increased in intensity. Ezekiel stepped toward the altar. The woman's eyes went wide with terror. He raised the knife, and then he moved not toward the woman, toward the nearest brethren member, flashed in the candlelight and buried itself in the man's throat before anyone could react. Blood sprayed. The man collapsed. Ezekiel grabbed the fallen member's robe, pulling it off in one motion. He threw it over the nearest candles, plunging half the room into darkness. Chaos erupted. He moved through the confusion like violence incarnate. Years of rage focused into action. He grabbed another man, using him as a shield, as someone swung at him, threw the body into 2 more members, tangling them, kicked out at a knee, heard bone crack, grabbed a candle holder, and smashed it into a face. Brethren were powerful men, but they were not fighters. They were soft, privileged, used to others doing violence for them. Ezekiel was none of those things. He fought toward the altar where the woman lay, grabbed her, cut her bonds with the knife he had somehow kept hold of. She scrambled off the altar and fled. Ezekiel turned back to face the remaining Brethren members, 7 of them still standing, blocking the stairs. "You have made a terrible mistake," Silas said, his voice steady, despite the carnage. "You have killed yourself and Catherine both. Maybe." Ezekiel said, "But I will take as many of you with me as I can." What he did not know was that above them in the main house, Catherine had returned, never gone to Philadelphia. She had been hiding in the slave quarters, waiting, planning, gathering allies among the enslaved people of Cypress Grove. And when she heard the commotion from the cellar, when she saw the young woman burst from the kitchen screaming, she knew it was time. Reckoning. Catherine had spent 3 weeks recruiting. She had moved from plantation to plantation under cover of darkness, speaking to enslaved people she had known her whole life, people who had watched her grow up, who had suffered under her father's ownership. She told them about the Brethren, about the cellar, about the rituals, and she told them that tonight was the night they could end it. 23 people came. Men and women who had nothing left to lose, who had lost children to the Brethren's rituals, who had watched friends disappear into the swamps, who had endured decades of brutality from men who believed themselves untouchable. They came armed with tools from the fields, axes, scythes, hammers, with rage that had been building for generations. When the young woman burst from the cellar, Catherine led them down. The Brethren members, still trying to subdue Ezekiel, did not hear them coming until it was too late. The enslaved people flooded into the cellar like a tide. There was no mercy in what followed, no hesitation. These were people who had been told their entire lives they were property, that their suffering did not matter, that their lives had no value. Now they were proving how wrong those beliefs were. The Brethren tried to fight. Judge Pelham pulled a pistol but was struck down before he could fire. Reverend Crenshaw begged for mercy and received none. Marcus Fanning tried to flee up the stairs and was dragged back down. Silas Ruttled, seeing everything collapse around him, tried one last desperate play. He grabbed Catherine, pulling her to him with a knife at her throat. "Stop. Stop, or I kill her." The room went still. Catherine looked at her father with no fear in her eyes. "Do it. Kill me. It changes nothing. You have already lost. I can still escape. I can still you can still nothing." Catherine's voice was cold. "You spent 16 years trying to break me, trying to make me forget, trying to convince me I was mad. But you failed. I remembered everything, and I am going to watch you die." She drove her elbow back into his ribs with sudden vicious force. His grip loosened. She spun away. And before Silas could recover, Ezekiel was there. They faced each other, the enslaved man and the plantation owner. All the power Silas had held, all the privilege and cruelty, all the years of believing himself untouchable. None of it mattered now. "You took everything from me," Ezekiel said quietly. "My wife, my children, my life. You did it for no reason except that you could to prove something to men who valued cruelty over humanity." "Please," Silas said. Just that one word, pathetic and desperate. "Wife, say please. Did my son, did any of the people you killed in this cellar?" Ezekiel shook his head. "No mercy, not for you. Not ever." What happened next was brutal and final. The enslaved people made sure none of the Brethren survived. 13 men who had believed themselves above consequence learned in their final moments that power was an illusion, that cruelty always came home. Eventually, when it was over, Catherine stood in the center of the cellar, surrounded by bodies. She was shaking, Not from fear but from release. 16 years of rage finally given outlet. Ezekiel came to her. Are you hurt? No. Are you? Minor cuts. Nothing serious. Looked around at the carnage. What do we do now? Now. Catherine's smile was grim. Now we burn it all. The cellar, the ledger, the evidence. We destroy every trace of what happened here. But that evidence could prove what they did, could bring justice. Justice? Catherine laughed bitterly. Ezekiel looked around. This is justice. The only kind we were ever going to get. If we try to take that ledger to authorities, what happens? We are hunted down and killed. The surviving Brethren members in other counties come for us. This only ends if everyone believes the Cypress Grove chapter died in an accident. If there is no evidence, no witnesses, no story to tell, she was right, and Ezekiel knew it, then we burn it. They spent the next 2 hours preparing. The enslaved people who had helped them left before dawn, disappearing back to their various plantations. They would say nothing. They had seen nothing. Nothing. That was how survival worked. Catherine and Ezekiel poured oil through the cellar, stacked wood and kindling, placed the bodies in positions that might look like an accident if anyone investigated. Then they took the ledger and all the journals and placed them in the center of the altar. Wait, Ezekiel said. He opened the ledger one last time and found the entries about his family. He carefully tore out those pages and folded them, placing them inside his shirt for them, so they are not forgotten. Catherine nodded. Then she took a candle and held it to the oil-soaked wood. The fire caught immediately. Within minutes the cellar was ablaze. They fled up the stairs and out of the house, stood in the yard, watching as flames engulfed Cypress Grove Plantation. People would come. Other plantations would see the smoke. There would be questions, but Catherine and Ezekiel had their story prepared. A terrible accident. A candle knocked over in the cellar, the master and his guests trapped below. So tragic, so terrible. No one would ever know the truth. As the sun rose over the burning ruins, Catherine turned to Ezekiel. What will you do now? Go north. Use the chaos of this fire to disappear. Maybe find others who want to fight, to create a network that can help people escape. He pulled out the paper with his family's names. I cannot bring them back, but I can make sure others do not suffer the same fate, and I will go north as well. Use the money I have been stealing from my father's accounts for years. Start over. She paused. Will not forget. I will document everything that happened here. I will write it all down so that someday, somehow someone knows the truth. They sealed the records. They will seal your testimony too, if you try to make it public. Then I will hide it. I will code it too. I will leave it somewhere to be found decades from now when we are all dead and it cannot hurt us anymore. Looked at the burning house. The truth has a way of surfacing eventually. When people tried to bury it, they stayed until the fire burned itself out, until Cypress Grove Plantation was nothing but ash and blackened timbers, until there was nothing left to show that 13 men had gathered there to commit atrocities. Then they walked away in opposite directions, Catherine north toward Charleston, and eventually Philadelphia, Ezekiel west toward the frontier, where enslaved people could disappear into communities that asked no questions. They never saw each other again. The official story was exactly as they had planned. A tragic accident. Silas Rutald and 12 prominent gentlemen meeting at Cypress Grove to discuss business when a fire broke out. Perished in the cellar, overcome by smoke before they could escape. A terrible loss for Colleton County. Funerals with full honors. Eulogies praising their contributions to society. Catherine Rutald was reported to have died in the fire as well. her father's mad daughter trapped in her room, unable to escape. A particularly sad footnote to an already tragic event questioned it. No one looked too closely. The enslaved people who had participated said nothing. Reason to speak, and every reason to remain silent. Most were sold within months to different plantations as Cypress Grove was liquidated. They scattered across South Carolina and beyond, carrying their secret with them to their graves. Years passed. The ruins of Cypress Grove were eventually demolished. The land sold, new buildings constructed. Life moved on as it always does, covering over the past with the present. But whispers persisted. Stories told in slave quarters late at night about the plantation where the masters burned, about the night justice came to men who thought themselves untouchable, about the woman and the man who made it happen. The stories changed with each telling, becoming legend, becoming myth. But the core remained, that cruelty had consequences, that power was not absolute, that sometimes the powerless found their power. In 1863, during the Civil War, Union troops occupied the area where Cypress Grove had stood. They found evidence of old tunnels beneath the property, found bones in the nearby swamp, found markings on trees that suggested ritual sites. But the war moved on, and no one had time to investigate further. Demolition work. A journal was found sealed in a wall. It detailed everything: names, dates, rituals, victims. But as Catherine had predicted, it was coded, and before anyone could fully decode it, the journal vanished from county records. Some say it was destroyed. Others say it was taken by descendants of the Brethren families protecting their ancestors' secrets. Few believe it still exists somewhere waiting to be rediscovered when the time is right. What is known is this: 13 prominent men died in a fire in 1841. Catherine Ruttall disappeared shortly afterward, though no body was ever confirmed found. An enslaved man named Ezekiel Cross was reported sold to a plantation in Alabama, but no record of the transaction exists. And for years afterward, stories circulated among enslaved communities about a network helping people escape, led by a man who had faced the monster and won. Those stories were true or just wishful thinking, no one can say for certain. But sometimes truth lives not in official records, but in the stories people tell, in the memories they keep, in the justice they remember, even when history tries to forget. This mystery shows us that power built on cruelty is never as solid as it seems, that secrets kept in darkness eventually find light, that the people deemed powerless often hold the most dangerous power of all: memory, the power of refusing to forget. What do you think of this story? Do you believe everything was revealed? Do you think that journals still exist somewhere waiting to be found? Your comment below. If you enjoyed this tale and want more dark historical mysteries like this, subscribe to Liturgy of Fear. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story, and share this video with someone who loves mysteries that blur the line between history and horror. These stories need to be remembered. These voices need to be heard. See you in the next video.